This episode of This Agile Life has been brought to you by BrilliantAgile.com, providing Agile and Scrum training, consultancy, and personnel.
BrilliantAgile.com. Done right, it's brilliant.
Recorded on Tuesday, May 14th, 2013 in St. Louis, Missouri. This Agile Life, Episode 16, Steampunk Virtual Appliance. Welcome to This Agile Life, a podcast about what it's like to be agile in the real world. Joining me today are my co-hosts, Nate Mackey.
Hello.
Hi, Nate. How are you?
I'm great.
You've been away from the podcast for a little while.
A little while. I think the last time I was on, I was hosting. So,
yeah, and you did a good job too. By the way,
thank you. Well, that's very nice of you. Thank you.
Yeah, and also going to be joining us tonight, but is running late because he couldn't find a parking place, is Amos King, and of course he will barge in and ruin the flow of our conversation, and then we'll
profanities everywhere.
We'll introduce him at that point. And tonight, what we're going to be talking about is space and co-location, and how important, or maybe not so important, depending on our host's perspective, an agile space and co-location is. So we'll just go ahead and get started. Nate, what do you think is an ideal space for an agile team?
Well, so we started with Kent Beck's, extreme programming book, and that was how we learned to be agile. And in that book, it's very clear that you need a team room, you need everybody, the whole team idea, where everybody needs to be there together, working together in the same space to be able to get things done. And we really embrace that. Now, we are in a situation where we don't get to have our customer in the room with us as much. If we were in an internal IT shop, that might be possible, but it's a little harder for consulting. But we did everything else. And we definitely saw benefits from people being together. Now, to be fair, we started out with people in the same general area, but we didn't start out pair programming. So we just had them in the same general area in a relatively open space. We had cubicles that just didn't have a lot of walls. They were mostly just structure. And so there was still a lot of communication, but it wasn't a team room. And we had limited success with that, I would say. But once we decided to really give pair programming a try, that's when we moved into a team area. If you're doing pair programming and you're not doing it in a team area, that's pretty challenging to really get all the benefits out of it. So we've really embraced the idea of having a team space. And in fact, when we moved into this new building, we set up the building with the entire idea that we were going to have very open area with teams that were together and divided only by whiteboard walls, and we could be very flexible and make the teams as big or as small as we needed to. So that's been something that has really become part of who we are in our culture, and so it's hard for us to envision anything else. So my instant answer to that from our experience is that the ideal space is a place where the whole team can be together. And I'll still say that even though we don't get the chance to have the whole team together, where all the developers can be there, the designer can be there, QA can be there, the customer can be there, product owner, scrum master, everybody can be in that space working together. That I still think is the ideal, especially if that space then has walls, places to put your big visible charts, places to track what you're doing. Maybe you have a Kanban board, maybe you have a screen that shows your build. All of these things are great visual indicators that provide value from everyone being in the same place and having the same information.
How important is it to have, so you mentioned like three different terms. You mentioned team room and team space and team area. I think that team space and team area are probably the same thing.
Okay, yes.
But team room sounds to me like four walls and a door.
It does, doesn't it? Yes. So I guess we mainly talk about team area if we talk about it. Team room is like you said, I think that's what a lot of places that start trying Agile end up with. When they I mean, I know when we come in and consult about how to be agile in an agile transformation, one of the first things we try to get them to do is bring the team together into one place. And generally what they'll do is go find a conference room that's not being used too often and just commandeer it and use that as their team area. And so then you really do have a team room. But 4 walls, and a place by yourself, I don't think is necessary. As long as you have your own space and you have a way to hang things or display things or show things, that if you were just in a completely open space with no walls, I think that you'd lose a lot of the capability of your team area by not having visuals for the team to use. But it doesn't have to be a room as long as you've got something that you can use to hang things on.
Okay. One of the things that I hear a lot from people, especially new people to Agile, when they go into a team room, they start having questions about, wow, it's really loud in here, or even a team area. It's really loud. There's conversations going on all the time, and it takes the new person a significant amount of time to either come to grips with that, or in some cases they never totally come to grips with it. And if you're not engaging them from a pair programming perspective or in other ways, they often will go to the headphones and kind of create their own virtual space, if you will, behind their headphones so that they can have some sort of a sound buffer. And how did you work through that? Did you have any trouble with your group when you started to convert, and how has that gone since then?
So I would be the first one to say that there are pros and cons with the team space, and one of the aspects that is a pro and a con is just what you said. There are conversations going on all the time, and that statement can be both positive and negative, because if the negative side is there are conversations going on, it's distracting, particularly if conversations start up that are of a personal or unrelated to the project nature. You can end up, bringing the entire team to a screeching halt by, telling an animated story about what happened to you last night when, you were at a friend's house or whatever. You can really do something that you would not be able to do in a non-co-located team, which is just make everybody stop working. So there are definitely there's a downside to it, and you might even say there's an upside and downside to that too, because the team is getting some concept of being together and having shared experiences and shared in jokes and all that kind of thing, and there can be value to that. But still, the point remains that if that's not done in moderation, it can really be a distraction. However, the pro side of there are conversations going on all the time is that you pick up on what's going on around the room, and as impossible as it sounds, I've experienced it from working on a team myself. You are sitting there working, and most of the time you just tune out what everyone else is saying. But every once in a while they'll say a word, a phrase, something that your brain picks up on, and you instantly perk up and say, wait, what are you talking about? What is that? And it's usually something very related to what you're doing or what you're about to be doing or what you just did. And it's a great way to get communication and information around the team. If you just solved a problem and maybe you haven't checked it in yet, or maybe you just committed it, and another pair or another person across the room is obviously having the same problem and is talking about it, how much time would you save by being able to say, hey, we just solved that. If you just pull our changes in, you'll have the solution and you're ready to go. And how often have teams that are not co-located had two people solve the same problem, maybe in two completely different ways, and then have to, resolve that as well, but, merge conflicts and all sorts of issues, when you can avoid all of that and save a lot of time by just finding out what's going on. Not to mention that just hearing about the project, hearing about the domain that you're working in, hearing about the problems that are being solved, the way that your infrastructure and your framework works that you're working on, all sorts of things that you can learn because everybody is together that you wouldn't be able to learn separately. So to your point about the fact that some people it just doesn't work for them, I would agree. There are definitely some people that environment does not work for. And we have, we understand that, and sometimes there are allowances you can make for the fact that people struggle with that. There's either put them in an environment where it's not so bad. Maybe the sound baffling is better or whatever. But in some cases, it's just that people are not really suited to work with a team in a team room or team area type environment, and you just need to find another kind of work for them to do. So it isn't for everyone. I say all the time that Agile is not for everyone if you're really doing it all the way, and that's okay. There are some very important tasks that have to be done that don't get done in an Agile team room, and so there's always something out there for those people.
I'd like to think that most people, maybe 85-90% of people, can get themselves to a point, they can train themselves to some extent to do exactly what you were describing and block out some of the extraneous conversations to allow themselves to zone in.
Yep.
But while still processing and using some what I'll call peripheral hearing,
right,
to kind of perceive the tone of conversations or the gist of a conversation so that they can perk up at the right times to participate. And I agree with you, Nate. I think that there are some people that are just never going to be a fit because they just can't work with that sort of constant background noise, that level of din that often comes from having a large or even a small group of people working together, speaking together. One of the things that I've run into recently is that within our Agile work areas, people will kind of come in and have little ad hoc meetings. Sometimes that's great because it pertains to what you're doing, and then you get some of that back chatter, some of that background noise that is actually informative to you. But when it's things that have absolutely nothing to do with you, or it's I got drunk at my friend's house last night and story, and you're not really all that interested in that, then that becomes a nuisance to people. We also have a situation where everybody wants to have their stand-up meeting, between 9 and 9:30. Somewhere in there, everybody's having their stand-up meeting. And, that kind of raises things. The pod down the way is real loud, so now you have to be louder. Maybe you have somebody that participates on a conference call, and they're saying, "What? I can't hear what's going on." Have you experienced that? And do you have any ideas for our listeners as to how to work around that?
Right. Well, we've definitely experienced the conference call issue, and that's a tough one. And actually, again, as we moved into this new building, we actually set up rooms where the AV was integrated into the room, so you could have phone calls with microphones that were suspended from the ceiling, and everybody could just stand around and talk like they would normally in a stand-up meeting, but it could be clearly heard on the other side, and in the same token, that person could be heard because just we could not find another good solution. In fact, I remember hearing that there was a team over at Microsoft that had one or two people that were remote, and whenever they had a meeting, their rule was everyone has to communicate using the least common denominator of communication. So if there was someone that was on the phone, then everybody had to be on the phone. So they would all go to their desks or wherever they needed to go, and they would all participate over the phone. I thought that was actually pretty insightful because you can lose so much by being on the phone that everyone else is getting, and you don't even know that you're missing it because it's visual cues, it's offhand comments that are too quiet to be heard on the call. You don't want to constantly be asking, "Hey, can you guys speak up? Hey, I missed that. What did you say?" You feel social pressure not to do that. And so it was ingenious to say, okay, well then fine, everybody's got to be on the call, and then everyone gets the same experience. So that is one option if you're really struggling with team members who don't know how to handle the fact that someone is away, and how do you handle that issue.
Have you tried that, using the least common denominator communication
We've done
method?
it a couple of times, not as a set rule, but most of the time when we encounter that situation, it's rare unless it's maybe a customer that's on the line. And like I said, we try to deal with that with technology, just so that the team. It's more important that the team communicates with each other sometimes in those kinds of meetings. The customer is usually there as the proverbial chicken rather than the pig. just kind of to see what's going on. So we were okay with them having a suboptimal experience, but it didn't happen enough that we needed to use that system. But we have on a couple of occasions, and it works.
I've tried this twice. When I was at Boeing, that was a rule that we had. Least common denominator. If one person has to be on the teleconference, then let's all stay at our desks and pretend like we're not next to each other and all be on the teleconference and the WebEx or GoToMeeting or whatever it is you use.
Right.
And everybody was okay with that at Boeing. When my current job and the current team that I'm coaching, that was one of the things I proposed because they have a large number of people that either work in another building, sometimes work from home, or work across the country, around the world. I said, if we're going to connect with somebody, let's do that, because we had the problems of teleconference phones stink, and they don't do a very good job of filtering out noise and selectively filtering out and letting through the right noise. And there was some revolt from people saying, well, too bad for those people that aren't here. We need to be together face to face. And I didn't have a strong argument against that other than to say it might just be easier for everyone to hear each other if we are all on the conference call or no one's on the conference call.
Right. Now, someone who might know a thing or two about remote meetings is Amos King.
Hello, how are you guys doing?
Hey, it's Amos.
Sorry I'm a little late. Parking during the Cardinals game is a feat in and of itself. Especially when none of the parking garages take a debit card and I don't own cash anymore. I don't even know what it looks like.
What's cash?
Yeah, exactly.
They don't take square?
It's still that ugly green color.
I mean, everybody's got a square reader now, right?
Now you're giving that away. That was going to be my pick because of my horrendous
night. Sorry. Okay. Welcome, Amos. How have you been?
Pretty good.
It looks like you have a new computer because there's less stickers on it.
There are less stickers. That's my work computer.
Okay.
And they let me selectively put on stickers, but they have to approve that. No, I'm kidding. It's not that controlled.
You have to fill out a work request for stickers?
I fill out a waiver for each sticker. It takes 90 days for approval.
So, Amos, what have you found? We're talking about space and being co-located, and we were just talking about some of the struggles with noise in areas and trying to connect with people via conference calls or meetings. What have you experienced now that you're working more remotely from your office in St. James? How do you connect well with people?
We usually try to use something like Google Hangouts or GoToMeeting, and they work really well with the Mac. The built-in mic on the Mac automatically has noise canceling with the Mac speakers and gets rid of a lot of the stuff in the room. The only time that I've seen that being a problem is when you have more than one guy in the room. And they all get into Google Hangouts. I'm like, can you guys just gather around one or at least mute all your mics except for one? And that works pretty well. And even Google Hangouts, like if you start to type, it will mute you automatically. It'll say you're typing and it will mute you so that you're not bugging other people.
Good idea.
It's pretty nice.
That's a little bit more of an advanced feature than what I think most teleconferencing solutions have or WebEx solutions. I don't think,
and it can be annoying sometimes. Like
when it mutes you,
because you're taking notes while you're talking, and then it goes away, and people are like, "Wait, what did you say?" You kept going in and out because it knows you're talking too, so it'll like flash back and forth really quickly. But hopefully Google will be able to figure something out there. I agree. I heard you guys when I walked in. We were saying that the conference room phones aren't very good. They've always been frustrating for me, whether it's been working with a customer or working with a team. I would almost rather everybody call in on their phone to a conference line, even if they're in the same room. Like cell phones have a tendency not to pick up too much extra noise unless people get pretty rambunctious. So that works pretty well. I think those are the
Have you tried
things.
that? Have you tried doing that before? Having
Cell
everybody
phones?
call in?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was good. Even with people in the same room, it was good until somebody starts being loud, or somebody comes in, doesn't know you're on a conference call, and they're loud in the background, and then it starts to pick up a lot of that background noise.
Right.
The louder they get. But as long as everyone's talking at a reasonable level, which I hope that we always all talk at a reasonable level during meetings, because nobody ever gets upset and yells.
Right.
It works out really well.
So, unless there's more on that, I wanted to ask we've talked a lot this podcast so far about the benefits of a co-located team, of having everybody together in the same space, and also the cons that, the fact that it's easy to bring the entire team to a screeching halt, whether it's a person telling a story or, or sometimes it's, a member of management walks into the room. And they're just
hate it when that happens.
Yeah, they just want to see what's going on or ask, hey, how's the project going? And all of a sudden, everybody feels like they've got to stop and look, just to be respectful or whatever,
They
and
feel like they have to pay attention to.
Right, exactly, right. So now you've stopped productivity for the entire team, whereas that wouldn't happen if they weren't all in the same space. So there's pros and cons. So, but you've worked now for a while in a situation where you're not with a co-located team. How has that been? Are you still? What are the thoughts there? And what do you have to do to make that work?
So at first it was really hard, especially coming from a place where we here at Asynchrony we pair programmed all the time. People were always around. I do find less distractions, but I also find that I miss them a little bit. The ability to somebody asks you a question, you get up and walk around, and right now somebody asks me a question, I'm still sitting in my chair. So, that's a major advantage. Is just I think that it's healthy to be around people and to get up and move around. So I try to get up and move around a lot being remote now. I do Pomodoros, so every 20 minutes I take a 5-minute walk around. I found that it's good for my health and good for my brain. My back quit hurting when I started doing that. But the working remotely, unless you're pairing remotely, you also have a tendency to go a little longer whenever you're working on an issue that you might have been more likely to just turn around and ask a question. Maybe, I don't know. A lot of people if you're not pairing, you have a tendency to sit there a little longer anyway. So it's hard for me to compare that because I was pairing all the time. But remote pairing works really well. There's a lot of difference in being able to see somebody's body language, though. Even if you're looking at a video on Google Hangouts and you can see their face or whatever, just because they're staring at their screen doesn't mean that they're paying any attention to you.
Well, and sometimes if you're sitting next to someone, you can tell what they're looking at.
Right.
You can look at them and see where on the screen they're looking and figure out what are you talking about based on where you're looking. And
yeah, because I can hold my phone right below the camera on my Mac and look like I'm looking right at it.
Yeah, that's right.
And be playing Words with Friends or something.
Sure.
Not that you've ever done that before,
no,
certainly.
I actually haven't, but I had somebody else telling me that I could. Because we were talking about the same thing, about how just because they're looking at their screen doesn't mean they're actually paying attention. I found one good way to do that is just start writing nonsense whenever they're not writing and see how quickly they pick up on it.
Right.
Give them a couple lines of nonsense before you're like, hey, are you paying attention? I think that when you're remote, communication becomes even more important. So even when you're pairing remotely, I use Tmux a lot, and I do voice. I don't do video a whole lot because I don't really care to see their face while it's in the way of the code. So whenever I'm doing that, I try to talk more. I think that I've become a better pair in working remotely because I'm discussing things more, where when I have somebody next to me, I kind of feel like they're right here. They ought to know what's going on, even though they may not. So I express what's in my brain a little more when I'm working remotely. And at first I didn't do that. That was really a difficult learning thing because I was just going. And then suddenly people are like, what are you doing? I have no clue. And it'd be 15 minutes. So it's a little harder to remember to pass the keyboard.
There's some of the good and the bad that Nate and I were talking about before, Amos, regarding picking up on organic conversations that happen. Somebody's talking aloud about a problem that they're facing, and maybe somebody, a couple of spaces over will say, well, wait a second, I already figured that out, and we haven't checked it in yet or something. How do you feel about that? Do you feel like you're missing some good organic conversation?
I think sometimes But I think that's more with not my entire team that I work with now is not remote. Only part of us are remote. So when they start talking in the office, yeah, but they've gotten really good about if they're asking questions and things that pertain to work. So I like it because I have less distractions because I don't have all those little conversations that I easily get pulled into. And they have a tendency to put it into our chat, and we have a chat, which I also appreciate having that because just because I wasn't there for the conversation doesn't mean that I can't go see the conversation and see what happens. And especially morning stand-ups, I think I've mentioned before, I do stand-ups through that. There's a lot less banter and stuff that I don't care about during stand-up because people are focused on here's what I've done for today, and we actually have a separate chat room just for status. So that's not in the normal room that everybody just sits in.
Right.
Which helps, and I've had doctor's appointments and stuff, and I can come back and see that. I can see conversation in the normal chat room where they're like, hey, I was trying to do X, can somebody help me? And I can see how they figured it out and how they work together, and it helps. But it's different. I don't know that I would say it's harder or better or worse. It's just different, and it takes some getting used to. The asynchronous communication I appreciate, but at the same time I miss the seeing people's face and sitting there. And I think there's an accountability thing that a lot of people worry about with remote work. And I think it, in some ways it's actually, because I'm by myself, I'm maybe watched a little more. It's easier to tell if I don't do anything for 3 days than if I have a team of people that are switching pairs all the time and pairing. It's easier for me to hide in that situation. Sometimes, if the team's big enough.
That's interesting, because we always talk about how back before we used to pair, that it was easy for people to hide because they could always, look like, oh yeah, I'm going to get that done. I'm working through blah, blah, blah. And part of that is discipline and pace, and you're expecting people to do small chunks of work constantly as opposed to how we used to do it, which was large chunks of work.
Right.
So part of it is that, but that's always something we talk about in the evolution of moving to pairs and moving to team rooms, is that it's harder to hide. But on some level, it's easier to hide if you choose the right pair to sit with,
right.
And if you contribute just enough to make it seem like you're part of it, but you're...
And if you have a large team.
Right, if you have a large team.
I mean, you can go a long time without writing a line of code in a large team.
It's
when
true.
Every time you pair switch, if you just kind of ask questions and appear to be slightly engaged, and if you switch pairs often too, it actually hides it a little more. I think that it spreads the knowledge of the team around more, so I like that. But it can really hide that somebody's not carrying their weight, because I only dealt with them on a big team. Let's say you have 16 people, I only pair with this guy every 3 or 4 days for an hour. It's really, I don't even notice. Maybe he's just having an off day. I haven't worked with him day in, day out to figure out that, okay, no, he's just not doing anything.
Well, I've lived in a situation where we had a person that was a hider, and it was a large team. And the person was under the radar from management of the team, but every developer on the team knew.
Right, and that's usually the case, it seems like. The developers know, but I think Amos is right that you can go for periods of time where people don't totally pick up on it. So
as long as it's not, 6 months.
Right.
In 6 months, somebody's going to be like, hey, wait a minute, this guy's never done anything. But if you can do that in spurts, if you could spend a week not doing anything, and then the next week you do just enough. And I think the other thing is, where you were talking about before you were pairing, you had that, is that when people are in the office, there's a certain level of trust that you automatically kind of give them because they're sitting there.
It's true.
Where if they're remote, you might be more inquisitive as to why haven't you got that done, and there's almost a higher level of accountability because you're on your own, because nobody can stop by and see that you're not playing a video game, that you're not doing your best. Yeah, you might be able to produce more than everybody else in half a day's work, and you can mess around the rest of the day. But people are they scrutinize you so much more being remote.
That's interesting.
That you have a tendency not to be able to do that.
So a lot of our teams have implemented something called a turnaround, and it actually even made it part of their process that something happens. Either some teams are like, okay, every time someone starts a new story that we haven't worked on before, instant turnaround. The whole team's going to turn around and talk and make sure that everyone's clear and they get their input in on that story before someone starts, and then they start. And other teams are like, well, if you have a problem, you can call for a turnaround. And that just means everybody swivels their chairs and they're all having a meeting together. And that can be really incredibly powerful if you're using it right, because you can have these instant meetings that assemble immediately and then disperse immediately after the problem is solved. And so if you don't have a co-located team, so if you don't, and I think there's two ways now that we're talking about that. One is you're just not co-located because you're in different parts of the same building, and everybody has their cubicle, versus you're not co-located because some members are remote, but you're trying to act like a co-located team even though you're remote. So
I think those both have some similarities too.
Sure,
but it's a lot different.
They're right. If you're trying to be intentional about keeping everybody together versus everyone's got their job, go to your desk and get your job done.
Right.
So my question is, I think there's power in that. Do you agree that there's power? And then in a non-co-located team, how do you mitigate not being able to do that?
So turnarounds are amazing. I'm a big fan of them. And you talked about a couple queues in order to have a turnaround. I always say this is my queue because it happens a lot. If I want to go to Google or any other search engine and search,
yes,
I'm not allowed to search before I ask the team, and make sure that they either know or don't know or whatever. And then afterwards, I can say yes, I agree with their answer and I can use it, or I can decide to go do some research. But whatever I decide, if I go do research or they didn't know and I go do research, I am responsible to come back to the team and disseminate that information.
Right.
And yeah, with chat, sometimes people aren't necessarily paying attention to it. They have their sound muted, and they don't see those things. I will try to bug people a little more. And again, like I talked about with the asynchronous communication, if we're doing it through chat and it's not just my pair partner or we're in a little meeting and I ask, I can go back and read when other people have had those issues, and I can learn something. And another thing that we've done, it has a tendency to happen after like a meeting. If we get on Google Hangouts and have a meeting, a lot of times people just stay on the meeting for the rest of the day. So they're just coding on their own, but you can hear everybody like chewing on their gum or typing. And that has been, when they're in your ear like that, it's really easy to say, hey, I'm doing this. So that works really well, but it also gets kind of annoying, and it's really... it's kind of odd.
Yeah,
like, it feels like somebody watching me, even though they can't see my screen. They see my face. So I'll like turn my camera off and sit there because I just feel like I have all these people watching me. It's a little creepy.
Which is the case when you're working with a group of people. It's just that maybe it's a different sensation.
Well, if you're in a room by myself,
a space,
and then
it's because you don't have any of the nonverbal cues,
right?
The people the physical people around you, and that feeling like, hey, there's other people here. That makes it more real than just the virtual. There's a camera and an eye watching me,
right? And when somebody
you forget and pick your nose, and then
in an open space, there's like like if they clear their throat or something. Some people do that when they want to talk to you. And in an open space, if the guy's 10 feet away, it's not for me. Or he may actually just be clearing his throat. But if he's like right behind me and he does it, well, when you're on that and everybody's sitting on next to their microphone, everybody is right behind you when they cough or sneeze, and you're like, it's kind of awkward.
You can have a little bit of, thrash can happen with these turnarounds, and I generally think that turnarounds are a good thing as well. But it can become a nuisance, right? You can just, if you have a turnaround every 30 minutes, it's going to be hard to get work done. So how do you filter that out in a co-located team? I guess the team has to kind of assess what works well for them and
Right.
when to do it, set up some ground rules maybe.
Yeah, I would think that would come up at a retrospective that, hey, it seems like we're having a lot of these. Is there a way to cut down on them? Is there something we can do to educate people better or, solve problems in a different way or whatever it is? It just kind of depends on why that's happening. Or get this guy off the team. He just wants to talk to people.
But how much time is saved in the guy not banging his head
Well, I don't know,
for a
but
certain amount of time? And I think that depends.
There's a
It depends
balance.
on why you're having the turnaround.
and how often you're pair switching.
Right.
If you're pair switching every hour, maybe it's not a big deal. We'll lose 40 minutes while he's trying to figure something out, and then in between we can do the talk. If you're pair switching every day, that could be a really long time before they ask for help. So that's why I try to encourage the Google thing, is because if you're asking for help, just ask the team. And a lot of times the team's going to give you the answer faster than you're Googling around, or you're going to copy and paste code from Stack Overflow, which is not writing code. And it's horrible.
yet it's
idea.
still the way 95% of us get our jobs done.
Including me. So I forgot what I was saying now. I'm going.
About the turnarounds.
I think they're great, and I've never had much of an issue with them. I think most of the time where I've seen where you talked about it getting to be too much, I've never actually seen that happen in practice when people are doing it. I've seen people say, we don't want to do it because of that. But once I've gotten a team doing it, it doesn't seem to be an issue.
So,
Yeah.
so do you have a preference at this point for co-located versus not?
I think a mixture of both is good. I really like being at home.
Is that the reason?
No,
Because you really like being at home, so
No,
therefore you justify that
no,
it works.
so
Because I would feel like I would want to do that because it's so nice to be working
I
close to home or at home that I
feel
would
like
find a way to
I have
justify it.
more creative thought maybe is the right word. I'm not real sure. Just in the fact that every 20 minutes I get up and go for a little walk. Well, I don't actually do it every 20 minutes. I probably get that in 4 times a day, but I try to do it. And just that stepping away, being able to go someplace where it's completely silent if I need to, or turn up some music. It helps me develop in how I want to develop, and hopefully bring more ideas to the customer or to my team because I have that ability. And I live out in the middle of nowhere, so it's nice to be able to go outside and have lots of trees, and it's quieter there than it is here. And I'll drive home for lunch, and so my lunch hours are actually a lot shorter. I have a tendency to work through lunch more often. I don't feel like I need as much of a break whenever I'm working from home. And if I want to get up and talk to myself and walk around the room to think something out, I don't feel awkward. Where when I'm around a bunch of people, I don't want to be the guy that's walking around the office talking to himself all the time. It's a little creepy. And I can't believe I'm admitting it, but I do. I get up and walk around my office, and I have a little bitty room for an office, so I walk in these little tiny circles and talk problems out, to the duck on the wall. This is usually after I've asked my team on chat, and they don't have any clue, and they're like, I don't know, come back to us, and I'll do that for a while. I miss pairing 95% of the time. I probably pair 10% of the time. And I think that's a function of my team, not remote. And I even have up on my blog, I have a little button that people can click to pair with me, and it sends me an email, and we can schedule a pairing session. And I've done some remote pairing that way in the evenings with other people, and it's worked out great. I think that the conversation, like I said earlier, happens more because I talk more, they talk more, because you don't have the nonverbal cues, or you think less that they know that they're actually following exactly what you're doing, I guess, because you can't tell if they're paying attention or not. And if you engage them all the time and talk to them all the time, you know that they're paying attention.
I really wish that it was that there was a binary answer to this.
I save a lot of money on gas. I spend more time learning about new programming techniques, ideas. I spend a lot more time on improving my knowledge and my profile than I did before, which I think also helps me and hopefully my company too, because they can point to, hey, Amos is writing all these blog posts, he's talking more. The user groups, I run 2 of them now that I'm away instead of just one. I have more time to put into that. So
you're an extreme case.
Like 10 people at the Ruby group here in St. Louis. Now we're getting closer to 30 people just because I'm able to put more time in there. And I think that my employer benefits from that. And my happiness level, I hope that they benefit from.
Well, I'll throw in one more thing that I think is a benefit. When I was learning a new language recently, I was working with a team. They're using a language I didn't know. I found that I needed some alone time every once in a while to work through things. And it's one thing to have alone time and work through a book or your own project, but it's something else to have alone time and be able to work through your work project and kind of be able to think through. Maybe you're just even going through what you did that day and making sure that you really understand why you did it and evaluating your decisions. And, it's so easy when you're pairing, especially if the person you're with is knowledgeable, for you to just kind of let them make the call on what direction to go in. Maybe you're still getting the code, but they're saying, here we really should put this, this method, this function here rather than there because that makes more sense. And maybe you followed their logic and maybe you didn't quite follow their logic. So I could see some benefit of being remote, still working with someone, but having that time by myself to kind of make sure I understood what we were doing and could really advance in that craft.
So you can learn by understanding the code instead of learn by faith is what I've called that before.
Yeah,
I told
that's
people
good.
I was like, you don't know what's going on. You're learning by faith.
That's good.
And yeah, there is a lot less of that, but sometimes it's also frustrating to not have a whole group of people ready. Like with the turnarounds, yes, when I do it in chat, not everybody responds all the time.
Right.
Whenever you're in a group, it's pretty easy when you turn around, everybody responds, and you can get a lot more knowledge input that way.
Right.
But yeah, there's a lot of that. Just in pairing in general, I think there's a lot of that.
So my summary on it is that not being co-located is okay, but the important thing is to be working as a team and not as a set of individuals doing tasks. That's what's Agile, is that you're working as a team, whatever you do to make that work. And there's a wide variety of tools and capabilities, but it's really a mindset that I'm working with a group of people and I really want their input and I need to know, that I understand what they understand. Versus I'm just, I'm assigned this screen and I'm supposed to make this field work on the screen and I'm just going to do that and I'll do it my own way. And if somebody else, has some code I can use, great, but otherwise I'll do it myself or I'll copy from Stack Overflow.
I think that's a good summary. And do you guys think that there are any roles that lend themselves to be better suited to being remote than others? Can a Scrum Master be remote or an Agile coach be remote?
Well, I really think it's dependent on the team. There's kind of been a theme through our last 3, 4, 5 podcasts is that communication. Yeah. Communication is the key to being a team, to making sure everybody knows what's going on, to talking to the customer. All of it is about communicating. And so ultimately that's what we need to focus on. And maybe we should read a bunch of books about communicating. We'd be a lot better off.
I would say that for a coach specifically, sometimes it's good for the coach to be away from the team and let the team kind of figure some things out for themselves and then come back and see how they've done. It doesn't have to be weeks. It could be a few days but come back. But that way, especially if it's a new Agile team and they're just learning, they're not just depending on the coach to tell them every single thing to do. They need some time on their own to make sure that they've got it, that they can make these decisions confidently and not feel like they have to turn to the coach every single time they want to do something. So I could see some value with that, with them not being co-located but being a visitor depending on where they are in their either transformation or development.
What I was really hoping we would get to at some point in the technology curve, and maybe we're on our way there, is to have some sort of presence, a presence device that is almost like a bot that is a head, like an iPad with your face on it, and you can kind of virtually be there, and have some of those those nonverbal cues. And I experience this a lot with some of the virtual members of my team currently, where they're out of sight and therefore out of mind.
Sure.
And even though they might send me an email frequently or instant message me, when I go and I look around the room, I'm going to set up a meeting and I need some people. It's like, okay, who's here? Okay, there are those people. Oh, I forgot about so-and-so because they're not here. But if there was some sort of virtual reality appliance or
right, some
presence,
representation, physical representation of that person,
and maybe I should just stick a little stick on a stand with their picture on it, and that way I know that, hey, that person is around. Maybe
that's the hipster version of the person.
Yeah, it's the steampunk version of virtual presence awareness.
I made my daughter a hipster PDA the other day. She really appreciated it.
It was 3x5 index cards, rubber banded together.
I folded a piece of paper, so it was an 8-page book.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's we've talked that topic out. Let's go ahead and do our picks for the show and wrap things up. Amos, do you have a pick tonight?
I do. I actually have 2 of them, and I can't put them in because I can't get it to connect for some reason to the wireless. So my first pick, because of my parking fiasco, is Square. I don't understand why anybody requires you to pay with cash anymore, anywhere, especially with how low the fees are. I mean, out of $15, I think they would have paid Square like $1, maybe. They're already probably making a killing out of the parking here for Cardinals games. So yeah, Square or something like it. I mean, we've moved on. Can I stop carrying cash in my wallet? Well, I did like 10 years ago because I got married. But
there's a kid in our neighborhood who mows lawns, and he has a Square.
See, if a little kid takes
awesome?
Square,
that is awesome.
These guys
Isn't that great?
should take Square. That's amazing. Square would probably really appreciate to hear about that.
Yeah.
They should do a commercial with that kid.
I know.
Yeah. And then they have they require you to have GPS. So you could always look online to see if he's going to come by your house.
Instead of the kid from what was that movie where he's, I want my $3.
My $2.
Yeah. Oh man,
That was Better Off Dead.
Better Off Dead.
Yeah.
Right.
I just remember him drawing the pictures and then animating.
That was a different one.
And then my other pick, I didn't actually have, but until I came in here tonight, Ernie Miller, who works for Living Social, gave a talk at Ruby Midwest about why remote work is good and why every company should want to hire remote workers. He also has some blog posts, and they're very compelling. He did an interview with Avdi Grimm on the Wide Teams podcast about remote work, and he talks about sending a recruiter a link to this thing. They wanted him to move to DC, and he lives in Tennessee, and sent a link to one of his blog posts. And apparently the recruiter took that to the company, and the company, who was totally against it, said, now we're considering remote workers because of that blog post. So
wow.
I'll find that blog post and put it out there.
Please
and
do.
Watch the video. His talk is amazing. And working remotely, we can all save the environment by burning less $5 a gallon gas.
Fair enough.
Nate, what are your picks?
All right,
pick tonight?
I just have one pick, and it's not really a Agile thing or a programming thing. It is in fact, you would call it a hipster video game. It's called Candy Box, and it is a browser-based game. And the fascinating thing about this game is it's all ASCII art, so it's all character-based and buttons. And that is the interface, is simple buttons and characters. So everything that's represented on the screen is made up of ASCII characters. It's awesome. So what's interesting about the game is that you discover how the game works as you go along. You get almost no instructions. So you go to the page, and as soon as you get there, it just starts counting up candies. And you have 2 choices. You can eat candies, or you can throw them on the ground. And you have to figure out what's going on. Eventually you figure out, oh, there's this person that shows up, and he will sell me things for candies, and so I need to collect the candies. And then, oh, now that he sold me things, I have a sword, and I can go on a quest. And so you find all these things out as you go. And I'm a little late on the curve with this because it was incredibly popular last week. It's still last week.
You're only 1 week behind.
I know. So, but it's fascinating. The game's not very long, and it's very addictive. And one of the hooks is that you could just leave it going in your browser, and it continues to count up candies, even if you're not playing it. So you can put it on a browser tab, go do something else, come back, and you've got more candy, and therefore you can use the candy to do things in the game. And so it's a great little, just have it going, and when you need a little mind break, go look in there and see what's new, discover how it works. And you really just have to discover everything, or you have to go use your social networks and see who else has played it and figured out if they know how to do things. So it's all like the old school Infocom, that style of game where you didn't get all this help and nice, guides and all that stuff. You had to figure it out on your own.
Right.
And all the puzzles are totally accessible, but they maybe make you think a little bit. So anyway,
I now know what I'm going to stare at on my screen next time I have a meeting.
Candy box. Anyway, so it's fascinating. It's a fun game, but it's just fascinating that something like this is so popular and so simple, and yet it's all about discovery. It's all about starting simple and growing and getting more complex, which relates to Agile. So there you go.
I'm sure I'm going to regret this because they're just going to end up costing me like 30 hours and playing.
No, that's what's great about it. You
Box.
Can't play it very long before you have to stop.
Okay.
And just wait for candy to accumulate again. So you only get you only have to play it for a minute or two, and then you got to stop and wait. So
I see.
It's fascinating.
Well, I'm sure I'll get hooked on it anyway. So my pick tonight is a real simple one. I came across my email today. Version 1 was sending out an email telling people that they have this nice little poster that you can get and print out and stick on your wall, and it's the poster's title is Understand Agile Development Methods. I think a number of people around here have the poster, and they're just giving it away. And if you want to have that, it's nice to carry around, maybe show people. As you're talking about Agile concepts, you can point to some of the things on the poster, and it makes a conversation assistant or even a conversation starter. So check that out.
Cool. Yeah, I've seen that poster before. It's cool that they're giving it away.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, that's all we have time for today. As always, I would like to thank a few key people that helped make the podcast possible. Our audio engineer and post-production guy, Dr. Lee McCauley. We get intro music from Mr. Rich Johnson, outro music from Dan Schwabe. And, of course, as always, I want to thank my esteemed colleagues and co-hosts for being here tonight. And even though Amos King was here late, I guess Nate will go ahead and thank him anyway, too.
Yeah, I suppose.
Especially since he fought with the parking and the traffic and the Cardinals and all his other
When we're not recording,
excuses.
I'll tell you how I got parking.
Okay. Thanks for being on the show, guys. Amos, where can people find out more about you, man?
I'm on Twitter and GitHub at ADKRON, that's Adcron, and you can find me on my blog as dirtyinformation.com, which actually has 2 or 3 new posts and a slightly newer design. It still is black and white, but we'll stick with that.
It's amazing.
Contrast.
2 or 3 posts, just amazing.
Hey, look, working remote.
Yep.
To be fair, me working remote was 4 hours of driving on most days, so it's a little bit different than somebody who's driving 10 minutes deciding to go remote.
Sure. I believe you.
Stop whining, John.
No, I'm not.
Tired of hearing about your drive.
Okay. Nate Mackey, where can people find out more about you?
Well, I do use Twitter occasionally. My Twitter handle is Nate Mackey, which is NateMckie. I also occasionally write on the Asynchrony blog. So that's blog.asynchrony.com. And so both of those would be good places. I have a GitHub account, and it's actually got some code on it, but I don't know that I'm ready to tell people about it yet. It's kind of shameful.
Come on.
So I'll have to check it out
I'll
first
bet
to
it has
see what someone would actually see if they went there.
The name's probably Nate Mackey or something.
No.
I know what the name
Amos
is
knows what it
because I
is.
created the account
Yes,
for him.
Amos knows what it is.
It's stealth. It's in stealth mode right now. Maybe one day it'll come out from
That's
behind
right.
stealth mode. All right, and I'm John Sextro. You guys can find out more about me at johnsextro.com. You can follow me on Twitter at JCSextro. Thanks for listening to This Agile Life.